Today, we recap the Marlins series, talk with Pirates beat reporter Andrew Destin, and preview the upcoming series against the Royals. You're listening to the Bucko Banner podcast, brought to you by the Just Baseball Media Network. Cue the music.
Rockin' 101, she compliment my taste. Whiskey in my lemonade, cause I like the way it tastes. Best seats at the Pirates game, they let me run the base. Yeah, my time is like my money, cause I can't afford to waste. Wifey is a lawyer, take my date to my dates. Or the steak by the plates.
Welcome back. It is just me again. We're going to recap the Marlins series. We're going to have an awesome conversation with Andrew Destin. Kind of just state of the union, how things are going on down in the farm as he's over there in Altoona talking to some of the top prospects in the system. We've got some updates on Endy Rodriguez, Termarr Johnson, Hunter Barco, and much more. He really breaks it all down for us. But let's get into this week. A good week in Pirates baseball. A sweep. I forgot what they call that sometimes. It's when you win an entire series without losing. A sweep. And that's what they did against the Marlins. An entire year sweep. Because if you don't remember, we started the year sweeping the Marlins. A team that made the playoffs last year. This year, not making the playoffs. Neither the Pirates, but the Marlins are bad. And that was showcased at PNC Park this week. I was at 2 of the games. It was rough to watch if you're a Marlins fan. I mean, just as a baseball fan. Jake Berger played a really bad third base. I think the highest velocity we saw from the Marlins was like 92, 93. The Pirates took care of business. That's what you're supposed to do against bad teams. And I'm not saying we're a good team, but we're definitely a better team than the Marlins. I think it showed some promise with what we have right now. You saw a really, really good outing from Bailey Falter. No hit through 6 in a game where we just came off a bullpen game. You had Carmen Mlodzinski start. You wasted your bullpen. You're going into a day game. You need him to eat innings, and that's exactly what he did. Just an overall great way to close out the series as we go into a much, much more competitive series with the Royals coming to town this weekend, which we're going to get into later. We're going to preview everything you need to know about the Royals organization, who they have going on the mound this weekend, and much, much more. But first, let's talk a little bit more about this week. Monday versus the Marlins, 3-2 victory, Paul Skeens Day. He was awesome. 6 innings pitched, 6 hits, 1 earned, 1 walk, 9 strikeouts. You saw the meme already, him counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Got to count them all, Paul. They were all there. 18 whiffs. He's got a 2.10 ERA. I know the rookie of the year is kind of between him and Jackson Merrill right now, and the odds are more in Merrill's favor, but this is unheard of stuff. 67 strikes on 98 pitches. He used the 4-seam splinter as primary pitches. Changeup 14% of the time. The one thing I've noticed about Paul, every start you're seeing something slightly different. A new adjustment that he's making either halfway through the game or going into the game to keep people off balance, not becoming predictable as he continues his major league journey. Hitters were swinging at 40% of the pitches outside of the zone. Again, I know this is the Marlins, but he went in there and took care of business. You had a bullpen of Holderman with a clean inning, Santana with a clean inning. Chapman gave up 2 hits and a run to close it out, but he still got the save. Offense. O'Neal Cruz hit an absolute piss missile in the first inning. Kutch with 2 hits. Reynolds with 2 RBIs. Nicky G had a hit and a run as a team. 6 strikeouts, 1 walk. 1 for 7 runners in scoring position. Again, we only scored 3 runs in this game, so not great. 7 left on base. But you got a W on Skeens Day. That's what you have to do anytime Paul Skeens takes the mound. Tuesday, bullpen game, as I mentioned earlier, 6-4. W with the Pirates. Mlodzinski opened it up. 2 innings pitched, no hits, no runs, no walks, 1 strikeout. He's been good in that role this year. In the way too many bullpen games that we've had, he's looked really good. And then you had Wentz, Nicholas, Baraki, Bednar with a clean inning in like the 7th. Hearing Renegade in the 7th inning doesn't get you as hyped up as it usually would, but it's good to see him have some success. Santana and then Chapman had the save. Offense. Kutch had a big day, 1 for 2, 3 RBIs on a home run, 2 walks and a run. IKF and Reynolds all collected 2 hits. Reynolds also had 2 runs. Gonzalez, man, continues to hit. It's just single, knocking in runs when it matters. He's stayed hot after being named Bucco Banner Hitter of the Week. As a team, 6 strikeouts, 4 walks, 2 for 12 runners in scoring position, 6 left on base. Still not taking advantage as much as they could. But again, a W, which brings us to Wednesday. As I mentioned, Bailey Falter was absolutely incredible. I just listed off, again, Carmen Majinski, Joey Wentz, Kyle Nicholas, Ryan Barucki, David Bednar, Dennis Santana, Aroldis Chapman. That's pretty much everybody. So you needed Falter to come in and really shut the door, and he did. 3-1 Pirates. Falter, 7 1/3, 2 hits, 3 walks, 5 Ks. He's got a 4.20 ERA on 20 whiffs. Bailey Falter had 20 whiffs, 57 strikes on 93 pitches. Here's what was making him successful. 52% of the time, batters were swinging at pitches out of the zone on the 4-seam. When that 4-seam is working at the top of the zone and you're getting guys to chase, that's the go-to. That could be the put away. It gets on you quick with that extension. He looked really good, man. And he's only going to have a couple more starts to close out the year. And we rarely talk about it, but man, he has just been so key for this team. You didn't really expect much of him going out of the year. You had 3 lefties in the rotation: Martin Perez, Marco Gonzalez, Bailey Falter, and he's the last man standing, and rightfully so. Bullpen, Colin Holderman with a clean inning. David Bednar, 2/3 of an inning, 2 hits, 1 run, 2 strikeouts. He was pulled in the 9th. I think it was more of a matchup reason, if anything, but you really don't want to see a guy you're bringing in a high leverage situation pulled for a matchup. Jalen Beeks came in. They were still able to close the door. Like I said, 3-1 Pirates. Offense, Jared Triolo has had a little bit of a power surge the past couple of weeks. He went deep for his 8th on the year. Brian Reynolds collected 2 doubles as a DH. His numbers as a DH are 300 plus. We're going to talk to Destin about it a little bit later, but there could be a position change with Reynolds, or he could be more like a DH platoon guy moving forward if they're able to bring in those pieces. I still think, there's obviously a spot somewhere for him because he hits. The defense just isn't there, unfortunately. Maybe he makes a move to right field. Maybe he plays a little first base, but man, he has hit all year. Nicky G had another 2-hit day. As a team, only 3 strikeouts, 1 walk, 1 for 3 runners in scoring position, 6 left on base. Really key for this team to get 3 wins on a series where you should get 3 wins. You're staying at home this weekend. You have a really good Royals team coming to town. The backyard brawls in Pittsburgh. The North Shore is going to be rocking, and you better believe that's all for Pirates baseball, because the boys are now officially on a heater. That's what they call it in this business. 3 in a row, man, watch out, because things are looking up for the Pirates. All jokes aside, really, really good to see them take care of business. There's a lot of questions that still need to be answered. There was a lot of hoopla, if you want to call it, this week, or questions thrown around about Shelton's future, which Sherrington seemingly put to rest, saying he expects Derek Shelton to be back in 2025. Take that with a grain of salt. We don't really know what that means. Obviously, you're not going to say, hey, yeah, the guy's fired with 17 games left in the season if you plan on at least having him finish out the year. But Andrew Destin maybe clears the air a little bit on that, and we're going to get into that right after this break. Joining us now for his 2nd appearance on the Bucco Banner podcast, Pirates beat reporter for the Post-Gazette, Andrew Destin. Andrew, welcome back.
Pleasure to be on, Adam. How we doing, man?
Not bad, man. We got a nice off day here in Pittsburgh. You're up in Altoona, as we were just talking off of outside of the recording. You found a nice little closet to join us for a couple minutes here on the show, so that's greatly appreciated. What's going on in Altoona, man? I know there's some interesting stuff with Endy getting some end of the year rehab starts. What are you seeing that you could report back on?
Yeah, first and foremost, thanks for having me on. But caught up with Endy Rodriguez before the game. Talked to him about the plan. He was supposed to catch 7 innings tonight. He had caught 5 innings a couple of nights ago in his first game back on the rehab assignment. But want to give credit where it's due to Endy Rodriguez for making his way all the way back, because this is not an easy thing to do, coming off of Tommy John surgery, to within a 9-month process be back to not only playing competitive baseball, but be doing so essentially in the same capacity as you were before you got hurt. So for him to be catching, very important. I know the plan is to move him around a little bit and get him some time at first base too, but had one passed ball from what I observed, but also had a couple of good blocks, threw a guy out at second base. And a comment he made to myself and Alex Stump from MLB.com, who's also here, a comment he made was that before the Tuesday game, he was a little bit scared. But when he gunned the guy down at second base in the second inning, he realized, okay, my arm's okay. I'm in a good spot. So Endy's in good spirits. Good to catch up with him, and he seems to be doing well.
Be a nice energy to bring back to the clubhouse. I mean, he's always smiles on and off the field. You mentioned, moving him around a little bit. The catching situation going into Pittsburgh next year is going to be a little clouded, right? You have Henry Davis they're trying to figure out what they're doing with him. The emergence of Joey Bart, and then obviously adding Endy back to the mix. Do you think the Pirates go into the season with Bart as the starting catcher and then move Endy around a little bit more? Or does that kind of depend what they do in the offseason?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's contingent on the guys that they have here already. I don't expect another signing like Yasmani Grandal, whereas Grandal was essentially, a security blanket, right? Because you liked what you got from Jason DeLay last year, but you weren't quite sure if he was a big league guy. Joey Bart was somebody that they had on their radar for a while because they knew he was going to be expendable from the Giants, but they weren't sure about him. And then, of course, Endy Rodriguez being out with the injury, there was kind of a need to provide more catching depth around them. And now you almost have a surplus of catching depth. So it's crazy how much changes within a calendar year. That being said, me personally, what I would expect is for Endy Rodriguez to get a good amount of time at first base, and also for there potentially to be the choice for Joey Bart to transition to playing first base next year at some point. Now, that might be just get some reps in spring training, see how it goes, and if it's a disaster, then scrap it. But if he looks comfortable enough there, then maybe you consider that as a once or twice a week thing. But I would say that first base is going to be a spot where they can rotate some of these catching options and, frankly, reduce the wear and tear. I think given the catching depth they have, nobody should be a Yadier Molina where you're catching 130, 140 games in a season. Spread it around a little bit more. Nobody should start more than 80 or 90 games. I think this is only a good thing for the Pirates, especially when, frankly, there's still some uncertainty. Henry Davis's bat has not played at the big league level. Who's to say that it will next year? And who's to say that Endy Rodriguez can revert back to being an average or above league average defensive catcher? A lot of uncertainty at play there.
Absolutely. I mean, I personally think the answer at first base, as of for right now, is going to be internally, unless you're going to go out and sign a guy to a multi-year contract. I think a lot of people are sick of the revolving door at first base with 1-year deals. I'm not to say that Tellez hasn't picked it up and he's been serviceable this year, but you've seen them with Billy Cook at first base a little bit. Like you said, Joey Bart may be getting some time there. Endy Rodriguez. I know Brian Reynolds' name's been thrown out. I don't know how accurate that is or how likely that could possibly be, but I think you might as well just kind of stick with what you have right now. And like you said, just kind of rotate guys out and based on what you got.
Yeah, and I would say the Brian Reynolds speculation, that's something that, frankly, I've thrown around a lot there as well because, facts are facts. It's a guy who defensively has not been a good defensive left fielder this year. I know he has a little bit of first base experience well back before he went to the minor leagues and things of that nature, but I would be a firm advocate for, hey, maybe that's something that you could rotate Reynolds there once or twice a week. So certainly you would like to have a lineup where it's set in stone and it's 9 guys and you got some true bench players that are spelling guys rather than rotating. But maybe that is the answer, is you could bring back a Rowdy Tellez and say to him, hey, you're going to face mostly right-handed pitching, but you might only be in the lineup 3-4 times a week. And one of the starts per week is Brian Reynolds, and another is Endy Rodriguez, and another is Joey Bart. Like, I'm right on the same page with you, Adam, that I would be very surprised if they went out and got a big-name first baseman. That being said, what I think Pirates fans should not be surprised by is if they acquire another middle infielder and an outfield bat. I think those would be the 2 greatest priorities if we're talking strictly position players. That's where I have my focus on, because I'm not so convinced that Isaiah Kiner-Falefa is an everyday shortstop. Frankly, I think that'd be a mistake.
I agree. The arm, I mean, I think we're a little spoiled with the arm that O'Neal Cruz had there at shortstop for the past year, and then going to IKF, it seems like it's almost like a lollipop to first base compared to like a flick of the wrist, 100-mile-per-hour throw. Speaking of middle infielder, you're in Altoona, so we'll stick with that. Termarr Johnson, he's kind of had a rocky year. He's been a little streaky. He's shown the power. He's playing a lot of shortstop in Double-A. What's the plan for him moving forward if Nick Gonzalez seems like he's going to be a staple piece to this, rebuild that they have going on, and he's not going anywhere? Does Termar stay at shortstop, or do they find somewhere else for him?
Yeah, I think shortstop, second base, those are, best case scenarios for Tamar Johnson. Just from watching him here, talking to various people, watching him over the last couple of seasons, Tamar Johnson is capable of playing middle infield, and preferably, I would imagine that's to the right of second base at second base.
Right.
However, I do not believe that he will ever be an elite, above average defender. At best, as a guy who's going to be league average. And as time goes on, there's certainly some concerns about his mobility and his range, given that he's only 5'8". So if you ask me in 2-3 years what Termar Johnson's position is going to be, I would say more likely than not, he eventually moves to left field. But for the time being, this is a guy that they want to work on the middle infield. They want to see if there's a potential there for him to, a home run would be if he could play shortstop. Frankly, I don't think that's very
Right.
realistic. That's probably a glass half full approach. But second base, I think he could do it. It more is a matter of how good of a hitter is Nick Gonzalez in 2 years? Is he still part of this equation? Because Termar Johnson, the hitting potential there is certainly elite, and that's why I think personally it could play in the outfield should they decide to move him to left at some point in the future.
You say 2 years. I know, the ETA on Termar, everybody was thinking 2025. I think it's going to be a little bit later, just considering the development of him. I mean, would you say that's accurate?
I think so, because I imagine next year he'll start in Double-A. There's an opportunity for him to maybe go to the Arizona Fall League this coming winter or fall. So maybe that's in place. If you do the Fall League, then you start in Altoona next year. And if he gets hot, maybe by the All-Star break, the minor league All-Star break, he gets a call up to Indianapolis. And if he tears the cover off the ball there, then sure, he could be a late season addition if there's playing time available, if there's a logical spot for him to insert himself into the lineup. So I would say it's certainly in play for him to get to the big leagues next year, but that would require him to have a season that we haven't quite seen from Termar in a Pirates uniform, in a Pirates minor league uniform. This is a guy who has struggled at first each season, gets hot, then gets himself a promotion. He started this year in Greensboro and spent nearly all of this season in Greensboro. There's no reason to rush him through Altoona, get him 200, 300 at-bats there, get him up to Indianapolis sometime next season, assuming all goes well. There's no rush with Termar Johnson. I understand the window of opportunity, per se, with the Pirates, given that you got Paul Skeens, Jared Jones, Bubba Chandler on the way soon, but they really shouldn't rush with Termar Johnson, considering how critical to their future he is.
I agree. And plus, with the lack of bats that you already have in the system, you want to try and make sure you get at least one right.
Yep.
Last thing in Altoona, and we mentioned it when we were talking earlier, Hunter Barco. That's a name that I know Scott and I have been really high on since they drafted him. I mean, it was a college arm. He went from Bradenton to Greensboro. He's in Altoona now. What do you see from the future with Hunter Barco being a college arm, a little bit more mature than your high school pick? I mean, he was thriving for most of the year before he got injured, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And I know he's a TJ guy. So what do you think the future is for him going into next year?
Yeah, I would say the future with Hunter Barco is got to keep him healthy. That's really the most important thing. Coming off the TJ, he had a shoulder injury in high school, hurt this year where it was I forget exactly what the medical terminology for it was, but it was a pre-stress fracture or a stress reaction, I think is exactly what it was, with the leg, which is certainly concerning. And the Pirates have been very hesitant about bringing him back along, just given that he's already met a certain high amount of innings and they didn't really want him to throw much more. He told myself and Alex Stumpf that the Arizona Fall League will not be in play for him, that he will not be continuing to play. So in terms of next year, fully expect him to come back to Altoona, get the start there. But, as you mentioned, Adam, this is a guy who is a college arm, who, despite getting injured at the end of his Florida tenure, was pretty darn professional of a pitcher already at that point, just given in the way that he approaches the game, his pitch arsenal. Now he's added a changeup, which funny enough, he learned from Tyler Chatwood while he was rehabbing from Tommy John surgery, and is something that I'll probably be writing about this week, if not next week. But that's all to say that Hunter Barco is certainly coming along well. It's just a matter of keeping him healthy. And I think one reason maybe the Pirates weren't willing to move him at the trade deadline, and this is pure speculation on my part, is given the stagnation of Anthony Salameto's timeline, that given that those are really the two top left-handed options in the farm system, the most highly thought of, moving on from Barco probably wouldn't have been wise, given that Salameto's kind of turned into an uncertainty. So expect Barco next year to start in Altoona. And from there, who knows? Maybe he could even debut next year if he stays healthy.
Yeah, Fingers crossed. And the only other lefty that I really like in the system is Michael Kennedy, who's in Greensboro, and he's a ways away. You mentioned the trade deadline. Let's talk about it because I've had some opinions on it. I know, a lot of people already know the deal with BDLC, Brian De La Cruz. The defense isn't there. At this point, he really hasn't even been an everyday player for the Pirates as they close out the season. They're not in contention anymore. What was your opinion when they made that trade? Do you think, I hate to say regret because I don't like hugging prospects. I like trying to make moves to better the team. I could understand it at the time, but as the season goes on, it doesn't seem like he could be non-tendered. I mean, at the end of the year, given how he's played, and really you plugged in a guy who strikes out a lot for a guy who strikes out a lot. So what's the plan with Brian De La Cruz?
I imagine they're going to give this guy some runway, right? You gave up a couple of prospects for him. I imagine they'll bring him back in some capacity. 3 more years of being arbitration eligible. He can't be a free agent until 2027. Brian De La Cruz, I'll be candid. When that trade was made, this is by no means to belittle anybody or anything like that, but I was not optimistic about any of the trades. Isaiah Kiner-Falefa is in the middle of a career year where he was hitting better than he ever had before, and he's regressed back to the mean of what he's demonstrated as a big leaguer. And is a good utility man, but at the end of the day, a utility man. But bringing it back to Brian De La Cruz, I'm not losing sleep over that trade because the reality is with Shim and Forrester, these are 2 prospects that, in my opinion, were not significant pieces of the future. And if, Shim coming off of Tommy John, Forrester really struggling to hit down in the lower rungs of the minors, he wasn't going to get to the big leagues, if at all, probably in the next 2 to 3 years, despite being a college guy. So he's going to be brought along slowly. If the goal is to win in 2025 and 26 and 27, and I understand that those trades were made people thinking that, the Pirates are all in, they're buyers, they're going for it all in 2024. What they were doing was slightly tinkering with the roster and putting it in a better position this year as well as for next and for the future. To bring the conversation back to Brian De La Cruz, yeah, he hasn't been good enough, but the tangible tools are still there. He still impacts the baseball when he makes contact. He hasn't hit for power like he has at all other aspects, at all other timelines in his big league career. So there's certainly still some time that they're waiting to learn more about Brian De La Cruz. But that being said, I don't think they're penciling in an everyday spot for him in the lineup next year. When it comes to spring training, this is going to be a legitimate competition between him and a number of other outfielders that there's still plenty to learn about.
Yeah, I would expect them to probably look in the offseason for another guy out there. And with IKF, the one thing I did say about that trade, I didn't mind the IKF trade, but I didn't think it moved the needle at all. Just because I think adding an IKF to this Pirates team is just adding, a bat because we're desperate. We need offense. And like you said, you see a guy who's having a career year behind the plate. You throw away Charles McAdoo. He was having a good year, but, again, who knows what's going to turn out with that. IKF moves the needle for a team who has it figured out. And like you said, you could plug and place him in a utility spot or a pinch hit. He can contribute and help. I just didn't really think it was going to do much. That being said, you have him under control for another year. So, I mean, it gives you a little bit of flexibility to possibly have him in that spot moving forward. And he could play third base too, which brings me to Ke'Bryan Hayes. Is Ke'Bryan Hayes done for the year?
Ooh, good question. I would be shocked if he plays again.
Yeah.
That's not based off of any reporting or anything like that. It's just, listen.
Why? Why would you throw him out there?
Why would you? He hasn't resumed baseball activity. The emphasis the Pirates have said publicly is to get his back into a better spot. There's 17 days left until the regular season finale. The team is 6 games under 500. Frankly, I see absolutely zero reason to hurry him along. Now, that being said, if you'd like him to just get a few games of at-bats under his belt so that way he has something to feel positive about going to the offseason, sure. But frankly, I would think the Pirates would be much better served by just shut him down the rest of the way.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I don't see much value in that. How much is the hitting issues related to the back this year? Would you put it 100% on that?
At least 80. I would say it's a big part of it. But it's so interesting with Ke'Bryan because he's basically reverted back to being the hitter that he was in 22 and parts of 21 when healthy. And I say that not based off tangible results. I'm saying it based off of, if you go on his baseball savant page, his launch angle, his attack angle, things of that nature, versus in 2023, in the second half of last year, he was elevating to celebrate, right? He was driving the ball with authority, hitting for power. We didn't see any of that this year. Now, I imagine a good portion of that you can attribute to the back not being in a great spot, but part of that is also approach. Part of that is this is the way I want to swing. This is how I'm going about it. And frankly, it didn't really work out for Brian Hayes or look all that great whenever he was healthy, whenever he was playing. Maybe not necessarily healthy, but playing through it. So,
Right.
but I do think the back is a key component of this. And when you're not able to rotate as you intend to as a big leaguer, maybe the approach goes to I'm trying to spray the ball instead of drive the ball. Which once you get in that mindset, it's hard to hit for power, man. It really
Yeah,
is.
it is. I know when we had Alex on the show, he called them worm killers, just hitting the ball straight into the ground. I mean, it was promising in spring training too, because I mean, spring training is spring training, but he was elevating the shit out of the ball there. And he probably led the team in bombs in spring training, him or Henry Davis, which
Right.
see how that played out. You're going to see a lot of fastballs, down there, but
Yeah. Spring
be,
training in a nutshell.
yeah, exactly. When the Pirates led the entire league in home runs, I believe, right? Somewhere around there. David Bednar. Let's just go down the gauntlet here. We don't have to get into what has already happened. More recently, he was pulled in the middle of an outing yesterday for probably a matchup reason, but I mean, it still didn't look great. What's the plan with Bednar or just the closer position next year? Is that going to be an open competition, or do they plan on just kind of seeing where he progresses in the offseason and putting him back in that role? Like, what's the confidence level here?
The confidence level is high given that this is a guy who's a former All-Star, two-time All-Star.
Sure.
And when you look at the stuff, so that's what makes this so interesting. And, not to plug my own story, but for those of you who can, post-gazette.com, I put a piece out about David Bednar today, or on Thursday exactly, where basically I dive into this of what exactly has been wrong with David Bednar because the velocity is up. He's
Yeah.
throwing fastballs harder than he ever has. The curveball, guys are still hitting below 200 on it. But here's the deal, and I talked with pitching coach Oscar Marine about this, as well as Bednar. The fastball execution at the top of the zone has not been there, and it is not there in a way that we haven't seen out of Bednar. And the reason is because when he gets into those tight leverage situations, he is falling out of his delivery. To put it simply, it feels like he's trying to overthrow. And so what happens is the fastball is either going to sail on you and stay out of the zone and it's a layoff pitch, or he's yanking it across his body. And by doing that, it's falling out of the strike zone. And not only that, if it's not at the top of the zone where the curveball starts, you can't pitch tunnel with the curveball. So opposing hitters can just spit on the curveball and not swing at it. And the fastball, whenever he makes a mistake pitch, which he's been prone to because the mechanics and the delivery have not been there, that's why we're seeing the fastball get tattooed so much more. Now, all that may sound concerning. Personally speaking, I think this is all very fixable in the sense that he just needs to get a full offseason under his belt, stay healthy. We have to remember he missed a lot of time in spring training and then missed a good chunk of time in the middle of the year. And each of those times coming back from those ailments, he struggled and then started to find his stride a little bit more. If he gets a full offseason under his belt, gets healthy, rediscovers how he's supposed to throw mechanically, then I have to believe Bednar would be in a better spot. How that pertains to the closer role, that's for the Pirates to figure out. I have to imagine that if it's not Aroldis Chapman, some other kind of veteran reliever is brought back to at least incite competition, and at the very least, make it so you have a really good setup, man. Whether that's Bednar or somebody else, but they need to get Bednar right. He's very close, but it's just the key thing is making sure in those leverage spots that he doesn't fall out of his delivery the way that he's somewhat been prone to.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree because when he's missing, it's the fastball is middle instead of up in the zone. You're used to him kind of throwing like a bowling ball fastball, as I would call it. I mean, it gets in on you quick, it's heavy, and then he's able to tunnel it with that curveball. And when you're throwing the fastball 98, 99 at the top of the zone, and then something drops off, you're going to be a lot more successful instead of if you're missing down in the zone. I'm excited to see it. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff in the bullpen. Kyle Nicholas. I mean, he's been a little shaky as of late, but he's really come on since the beginning of the year. I mean, his stuff is gross out of the pen. I think there's a ton of potential there. I think he does have closer stuff. It's just a matter of harnessing it. I think Carmen Mlodzinski could potentially be a high leverage guy. Do you think there's any competition with those guys, or they kind of stick them still, in the 6, 7, 8 role?
Yeah, I think you keep them in those roles, but allow them to pitch into the higher, more leverage roles, which frankly Nicholas did for a good chunk of the season there, and Mlodzinski has done at times. I mean, these are guys who were previous starters in the minors and were high pedigree guys, top 20 prospects. I mean, Cal Nicholas was the centerpiece of the Jacob Stallings trade. Carmen Majinski, if memory serves me right, was either a top 40 or top 50 overall pick.
Yeah.
So like these are two guys that you look at and say, they got the pedigree, they got the stuff, they just need more big league experience. Now, if that means they are highly coveted, relied upon guys in 25 or maybe more so in 26, that's contingent on how they perform when they do get health or in the, they've got a full season under their belt and they're starting with the team out of camp because Majinski was bit by the injury and Nicholas, really struggled in camp and then started the year in Indianapolis and then was called up kind of out of necessity. So there are two guys that I think the franchise looks upon very highly of and thinks highly of and wants to see them perform in top spots. But it's kind of a matter of, okay, well, how often can you get them in these leverage roles, in these leverage spots, and see how they perform? Because it's kind of been middling when you rely upon them too much in contests that aren't a 7-2 game in the sixth inning.
Right. Right. And I'm happy, like, at least with the bullpen wise, to see Barucki back at the end of the year getting some innings. Any news on Dari Moreta? I feel like that's just been quiet ever since that happened. I mean, they probably obviously expect him back next year at some point. Has there been any rehab news on Moreta at all?
It's funny you say that. He was actually in Pittsburgh this past week. He joined the team in the clubhouse, was hanging around, I believe, for checkups. But I forget exactly how many months now were removed from Tommy John surgery, but that's 6 months or 7 months removed. So
Yeah.
probably a couple months away from still, getting back to truly competitive throwing. But I would have to imagine that he's somebody they look at as an option in 2025. However, that might be more mid-season, something like that, where
Sure.
starts out spring training, gets worked up, goes to the minors to do a little rehab, and then maybe you could expect him back all throughout a target month of June. But he could be earlier than that. He could be later than that. I just don't imagine he would be somebody who would be, an opening day roster candidate per se. I imagine there's a little bit of rust he's going to have to build off here or pitch off here once the season gets underway in 25.
Couple more questions about the immediate roster right now, or at least the roster going into 2025. I mean, we know we have so many pitching prospects. You almost don't know what to do with them at this point. And so many guys, a couple of guys that are on the cusp of making the roster, and Chandler and Thomas Harrington at some point. How do you see those guys fitting in next year? Could you see kind of like an emergence like Jared Jones coming off the spring training roster onto opening day? What does that mean for guys like Luis Ortiz or Bailey Falter?
Yeah, supremely high on Bubba Chandler. He's a guy that I think has the potential to be just as good, if not better, than Jared Jones.
Yeah.
Certainly glad for the Pirates' sake. No personal interest in the matter, but that they didn't trade Bubba Chandler for some big name guy at the trade deadline, I think that would have been supremely foolish. Thomas Harrington certainly to me projects more as a 4 or a 5 with the ceiling of a 3. But you need guys like that. You need guys like that at the back end of the rotation. So it's an interesting case because Chandler's progress has been quicker, but he's also a high school guy versus Harrington being the college guy who doesn't have a lot of mileage, didn't become a pitcher until, frankly, late in high school until college. He's certainly a late bloomer. So both guys, I think, are in play to make their MLB debuts next year. Now, if you ask me who's going to make the debut quicker, I'm certainly pointing to Chandler. It's got to be Chandler. I'd be shocked if it wasn't him. Harrington, though, depending on how you feel about the pitching depth, maybe that's the kind of guy you could dangle. Maybe he's the kind of guy you'd be feeling, all right, you can make him expendable, whether that's over the offseason, winter meetings, things like that, or back when you get to the trade deadline next year, trade him, flip him for a big bat. Like, I think you have options there. So I would say that Thomas Harrington certainly maybe the more expendable of the two, but Chandler, that's a diamond. Can't get rid of that guy. You got to make sure he stays invested in this team or stays with this team, and that guy's up at the big league level, frankly, as soon as possible in 2025.
Any news on? I totally agree with Chandler. I mean, he's an absolute dog. I mean, even when the fastball is like not working and he's missing middle, people are still swinging over it. It's got so much ride on it. Jack McMullen, who is the AAA announcer for the Indians, and he's our boss here with Just Baseball, always gives us updates on him. And he had an interview with him, and the baseball IQ is there, man. Like the preparation is there. I'm really excited for Chandler next year if he stays healthy. Last guy with AAA, Braxton Ashcraft. I know he's had some forearm issues. Any updates on Ashcraft and where he projects?
Yeah, it's tough to say. I mean, still in a non-compete mode, being shelved there with Indianapolis. I imagine Arizona Fall League is something they would consider, but on the same token, he has already thrown a lot of innings this year and is just
Yeah.
2 years removed from Tommy John. So I would say Ashcraft maybe 50-50 on the AZL stuff. But in terms of his long-term future, I'm as big of a drum beater for Braxton Ashcraft as the next guy. 3 above average to plus pitches, a fourth one that's coming along. The curveball, the slider. He calls it a slutter because he mixes it between a cutter and a slider. The four-seam fastball is elite. Like, this guy, his frame, it projects so well, but it's just been staying healthy. So you have to
Yeah.
wonder at some point, is that workload related? And is it time to consider moving a guy like that to the bullpen? I think it has to enter your mind too, because frankly, he could be a really helpful guy at the back end of a bullpen. Which
Yeah,
you
the
could,
stuff plays, I mean,
yeah,
obviously in short stints.
yeah. So I would say that he's somebody that I would consider as a bullpen option for 2025. But the operative word is healthy. That's always going to be the word with Braxton Ashcraft, just given those issues, like you
Yeah.
mentioned, Adam.
All right, Andrew. Well, we're coming up on the 30-minute mark here. I was going to ask you a specific question, but I'm sure you're sick and tired of getting it. So I'm gonna ask it in a different way. We're gonna play a little game here. Just
Okay.
simple yes or no, and then I'll get you out of here. I'm gonna ask you a list of questions, and then we'll be done. All right. I just want a yes or no. If you feel like you need to elaborate on it, that's fine, but we can get through it. All right.
Aye, aye, Captain.
All right. Pirates explore a trade with Key Brian Hayes this offseason.
Yes, but probably keep him.
Andrew McCutchen is a Pirate in 2025.
Yes.
The Pirates re-sign one of Rowdy Tellez or Aroldis Chapman.
No.
The Pirates win 80 games this year. I know that's a very kind of like we only got like 16 left.
So my preseason prediction was 79, which I feel
Ooh,
tremendous about right now. I don't mean to,
yeah, that's
bubble, but I feel
pretty
great.
good.
So I will say no, just because I want to ride with my preseason prediction.
Very good, very good. Last one. Derek Shelton is the manager in 2025.
Yes.
All right. That's why I didn't want to spend too much time on that last one. I know it's been kind of going around a lot, but Andrew, yeah,
it's all good, man. It's worth asking about. Not to cut you off or nothing, but hey, I mean, given Ben Cherington's remarks, I imagine that that's a big topic amongst people. I take it at face value, and I do not expect Shelton to be fired. I expect him to be retained. That being said, I imagine there have to be changes to the coaching staff or internally at the minor league levels, major league levels, things like that. So they're not being stagnant. They're not admitting, the Pirates aren't saying, okay, we don't care or anything like that. It's more a matter of they want to ride with Shelton. There's probably going to be changes elsewhere.
Awesome. Andrew, it's always a pleasure. Appreciate you joining us. We're going to have to get you on again soon. Noah's got like 4 appearances, so we're going to have to up your numbers a little bit to keep the competition going. But as always, man, we really appreciate your time.
Always a pleasure, guys. Thanks so much for having me on. Or just Guy, no Scott. Just
riding solo now. All right, man. Welcome back. Thank you again to Andrew Destin for joining us, especially since he's out in Altoona right now. Boots on the ground reporting. What a great conversation. We definitely learned a lot there about the Altoona team, the State of the Union, and possibly the future in 2025, which brings us to this weekend in the Royals recap. This is a good Royals team, a team that I saw earlier in the year. The first week of the season, I was in Kansas City, knocked that park off the list. And man, what a beautiful park Kauffman is. I mean, I think it's just not talked about nearly enough because it's in the middle of the country. The only downside to it, not much around the stadium. There's Arrowhead and then about 5 miles of parking lot and a Best Western. That's about it. The park itself, for something that was built in like the 1970s, 80s, it looks pretty similar to PNC Park. They've done an outstanding job keeping that place up. It's such a nice place to watch a game. Everywhere you go in the park, you're able to see the playing field. The outfield has the fountains going all the way around. It's really family-friendly atmosphere, good food, barbecue all around the park. I got one of those gimmicky helmets with like the brisket nachos in them. They were top tier. Not going to lie. Beats the Renegade dog. A little less gimmicky. It's actual good food instead of pierogies thrown on a hot dog. That aside, the Royals are 80-67 on the year. They're second in the AL Central behind the Guardians. They're 4.5 back. This is a team with a lot of young talent mixed in with some really good veterans. as shown with, Seth Lugo getting an all-star this year, Salvador Perez. Then you got Bobby Witt Jr., who they signed to a massive deal, which I love for an organization like the Kansas City Royals, who's, they're not going to spend as much money as the Dodgers, the Yankees, and so forth, but they're finding ways to make what they have last and adding pieces to that equation that are going to make them successful year in and year out moving forward. Overall, this team can hit 7th in the league in hitting. They've scored the 9th most runs, 8th most doubles. They're only 29th in strikeouts. Pitching, they're 11th overall, 29th in home runs allowed, 9th in walks allowed, 24th in strikeouts. Here's the good news. You're not going to face their 2 all-star pitchers in Cole Ragans and Seth Lugo, likely. They have not announced a single pitcher for this weekend. It's 8:26 p.m. on a Thursday night, and there's still not any announcements whatsoever. But going based off of what their rotation has been in the past couple of weeks, I've pretty much predicted what you're going to see Friday through Sunday. Friday, starting with Alec Marsh, 7-8 on the year, 4.66 ERA. In 116 innings pitched, 105 Ks. Really going to work off the off-speed stuff here. Top tier in the league in off-speed run value in the 88th percentile. The fastball is really not working for him in the 13th percentile, but you have an arsenal of a four-seam, a slider, a curve, a sinker, change, and sweeper. The four-seam is going to 38% of the time, sitting around 92 to 94. The batting average on it's 204, expected 214, so you're not getting much luck there. It is what it is. It doesn't have a ton of movement, so he is susceptible to being hit hard. In fact, 40% of the time that fastball is getting hit hard. The slider at 17% sits around 87 miles per hour. The batting average on that, 277. The curve, 16% of the time at 83 miles per hour. Hard hit on the curveball, 47% of the time. And then the sinker, change, and sweeper, he throws less than 13% of the time. Here's the deal with Marsh. You're going to get a lot of soft contact. The average EV on him is like 89 to 90. The expected batting average is 266 because the fastballs stay in the zone early in the count with the four seam and the sinker. With the secondary pitches, he's going to try and stay down and away, back foot to the lefties. He's not going to make a lot of guys whiff, doesn't walk a lot of hitters, and the splits are just about the same. So you're not really going to get an advantage with a lefty-heavy lineup here. Nothing spectacular here in the arsenal. Saturday, the Pirates see Michael Wacha, the 33-year-old veteran, 12 years in the league, familiar with him from the time with the Cardinals. He's had pretty decent success against the Pirates in his long career. 7-3 record with an ERA of 3.68, 70 strikeouts, and 18 appearances. Some notable guys. There hasn't been many at-bats against him with this current Pirates lineup. Andrew McCutchen has had 42 at-bats against Michael Wacha and has found a lot of success. 14 hits, 2 doubles, a triple, 2 home runs, 5 RBIs, 3 walks. His slash line is 333, 378, 571 with a 949 OPS. And then Michael A. Taylor is hitting 286 in, like 4 or 5 at-bats against Michael Wacha. Not that I expect to see Taylor in the lineup because of that success, but I think it's, relevant to note here. This year, 2024, he's 12-7, 3.34 ERA in 151 innings pitched, 130 Ks. He is excelling this year in drawing soft contact. 89th percentile in soft contact. Average EV is around 86.9. The off-speed run value is in the 99th percentile, 72nd percentile in walks. He's going to generate a ton of swings in the zone. He's going to pound the zone with strikes, and he's going to get a lot of swings. He's going to get a lot of contact, especially out of the zone. His out of the zone contact rate is at the top of the league, which leads to a lot of soft contact, a lot of balls getting topped, and a high ground ball rate. He's getting great extension down the mound, so that 92 to 94 mile per hour fastball, that's kind of been where he sat pretty much his whole career. He could pump it up a little bit, but that extension is going to have it get in on you a little bit faster. The arsenal, the changeup 32% of the time at 81 miles per hour, it's gross. He's going to be able to put away righties and lefties on the changeup. The four seam, sinker, cutter, slider, curve. The four seam he goes to 23% of the time at 94 miles per hour, like I mentioned. And then the sinker 15% of the time, cutter 11, slider 9, curve 9. But really, it's that changeup and four seam mix that you're going to see a lot. That changeup just drops right off the table, generates a lot of swing and misses on that. The splits nearly identical here. Again, you're not going to get much of an advantage either way. The changeup plays both against lefties and righties. The lefties have slightly better success just because you're getting a lefty-righty matchup, but it's not by much. So it'll be interesting to see the veteran Michael Wacha on the mound on Saturday. I will be there just because it's going to be, good baseball to watch. The Royals coming to town. And then Sunday, I am predicting that Brady Singer is going to take the hill. Got off to a really hot start this year. He's 9-10 right now with an ERA of 3.42 in 163 and a third innings pitched. He's got 153 Ks on the year. Top of the league in extension and ground ball rate. Fastball run values, 88th percentile. He's not walking a lot of hitters. The arsenal is a slider heavy usage at 41% of the time. Sits around 83 miles per hour. The batting average on it's only 208. He works the slider at the bottom half of the zone. He rarely misses up with it. It's going to be back foot to lefties, go away from righties. The sinker, 41% of the time at 92 miles per hour. 266 batting average on that, expected batting average of 280. He throws this for a strike a lot. The sinker is his go-to fastball. It's really a two-pitch guy here. Slider, sinker. The four seam's only thrown 11% of the time. If he does throw it, it's going to be at the top of the zone to try and get you to swing. Sweeper 4% of the time, changeup 2% of the time. The splits here, it's the only one of the series that we're going to see a significant difference with lefties. They are slashing 295, 365, 481, 13 bombs, 33 walks. Versus righties, they're hitting 199, 245, 282 with only 4 bombs and 13 walks. More notably, on the road, batters are hitting 278 with 12 bombs. So maybe a little bit of advantage for the Buccos going into the home series this weekend. Get out there if you can. This is going to be coming out tomorrow morning. So you'll have Friday, Saturday, and Sunday to listen to this to get yourself up to speed on everything you need to know about this Kansas City Royals team. Go enjoy the Pirates while the season is still going on, because you have this Royals series. The team goes away. They come back for a short Brewers series during the week, and then they're off to New York, and the season's done. Go spend some nice summer days, getting a little bit of cooler weather at the ballpark. Obviously, go watch your football. Side note, I think Jared Jones has had 2 Sunday starts back to back, and he's just getting screwed with the attendance because the Pittsburgh mentality over here has totally shifted to the Steelers. Unfortunately, it's still early in the year for the Steelers. There's plenty of football left to be played, but there's not much baseball. So just cherish these moments while they last. Hopefully the boys can finish strong. If you don't already, say it every week. If you haven't done it by now, what are you doing? Go follow us on Instagram. Go like, comment, share, Twitter, same thing, TikTok, Threads. If you want to look at our stupid faces or just my stupid face for the next couple of weeks, go to YouTube, hit subscribe, leave a comment. If you're just listening, leave a 5-star review, download the episode. It means a ton to us. Thank you for listening, and let's raise it.
Rockin' 101, she compliment my taste. Whiskey in my lemonade, cause I like the way it tastes. Best seats at the Pirates game, they let me run the base. Yeah, my time is like my money, cause I can't afford to waste. Wifey is a lawyer, take my date to my dates, or the steak by the plates.